Here's where we left off with a background behind the skull. And now what we're going to do is to do some refinement, some polishing up of areas. And that also means still working a little bit with your darker pencils, so the 4B or the 6B. And that's what I'm doing with the charcoal. So this is the stage at which I'm going to do some refining. I'm squinting my eyes looking at places that need to go darker. Remember, I told you it's better to go too light than too dark. Well, now you can actually start to compare one shadow area to another. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm just trying to compare. I'm looking at that chin right now, and I'm going to work on that neck some more and the chin as well. So I think the spine needs to go darker. As I'm working, I'm constantly comparing my drawing to my reference picture. So my eyes are kind of flicking back and forth between the two. And that's why it's nice to have your reference picture really close by. And I'm adjusting things and moving things around subtly. I'm also getting in cracks and indentations. I'm also exploring kind of using both the blending stump and my raw pencil stroke. So just a regular mark on there. And I don't want to have huge gaps in between my shading unless it's part of a deliberate hatch. So you want it to look neat. All right, so here's the stage where I feel comfortable going in with the white pencil. And I know it's a little bit hard to see here, but that is gray paper. So when I pop the whites, it should make those light areas pop into a highlight. And the thing about the white is you want to use different amounts of pressure, kind of like you're doing with the graphite pencil, that you want it to be more intensely bright in some areas, but then you want that bright to just fade into the gray of the paper at other times. So it is unfair to say to use all one type of pressure. You want to actually vary it. And the direction of your stroke is important here. I'm thinking of that top part of the dome of the head as a sphere. So I'm trying to make my lines kind of wrap around that form. And I'm picturing where the light's coming from and how it's kind of shining down on that top of the head there, on that skull. So I do want you to try and hold your pencil back farther than you're used to. You can kind of see on the video how far I'm holding mine. It will feel weird at first. It feels kind of alien, but that's the way that most professional artists draw. And the reason why is you can get more of your elbow and wrist into the action. It'll actually allow you to be more accurate with your stroke and your mark making. And I think it's actually easier to shade that way. But it goes against all those habits that we've formed since childhood about how to draw. And I think it's because of how we write. We're so used to writing, and when we write, our fingertips go really close to the point of a pencil. But when we draw, you want to do the opposite. You want to let that stick kind of help you so that the gravity of that pencil stick kind of weighs down, so it's doing some of the shading for you. And you want to get farther back away from the picture and avoid putting your hand into the picture, which is something that's very easy to do. It's very easy to accidentally drag your hand in the paper. It's one of the reasons why I prefer to work upright on an easel, so I don't get my hand smudging my artwork. You always have to be conscientious of where your hand is. So there are going to be areas where it's light, but it's right on the cusp of mid-tone. You want the mid-tone, if you're working on gray paper, to be the gray paper. But there are these areas where it's like kind of questionable. In that instance, you just use a very light shading of the white pencil there. And that's what I'm going to be doing around the eye socket. There's some subtle light shading there. One thing I forgot to mention about the cracks is as those cracks go into shadow, they should get darker. As they move into light, they should get lighter. That's why some of the cracks look darker and some kind of transition from a dark to a light. And the longer you work on your drawing, the more you're going to notice those little subtleties and the shifts. You do want to try and make your drawing have volume or form so that it looks 3D. And I like to use hatching, so I'm kind of doing this hatch stroke there, especially if I'm trying to get a lighter shade of, or a pale shade of white, so leaning more towards gray, not too bright of a white, then I will do hatching. And I'll actually do a stroke, lift up, stroke, lift up, not back and forth because it's too easy to go too bright that way. And you'll see I'm actually alternating between the black pencil to touch up and the white pencil, because at this stage I want to make sure that I fix anything that needs fixing. Make sure that you always keep the white separate from the black, that they don't overlap. There may be instances where they are close together, like side by side, but never one on top of the other. You will get a muddled, muted out gray. There's some interesting shapes happening inside of that nasal cavity. That's the nose. You really want the eye socket, both the eye sockets and the nose, to read as a cave, like a cavern. So it's not just a black circle. It should have some depth to it, so you should be able to kind of see towards the back of the cave. Now, I have been working a little bit off camera in places. That's why it's developing so fast, or it looks fast. It really wasn't. It took like an hour and a half more to work on it. And it's still not going to be perfect even at the end. But that's okay. The goal is to try to make an attempt and try and get some of that bony texture where stuff kind of pops out and other things kind of recede. And just be careful that you don't go too much white or too much black. There has to be a balance in between, and there should still be some like gray of the paper showing through at the end. You want to let the gray of the paper do some of the work for you. If you're working on white paper, of course, you want the white of the paper to work for you as your brightest lights. All right, so I think at this point, we can call it done. I am going to have you submit it, and I am going to give you feedback on it, and it will be submitted through a Google slide. So look for a Google slide when you are ready to turn it in.